way we want to proceed is we want to give up to, we had said maybe 10, 15 minutes per panelist, because we want to have time to engage the conversation, okay? And so we invite you now to pull out your papers. You should have your papers in your portfolios. You can bring them now. And you will find the agenda. An attachment, you will find the annotated program. So we ask you to refer to there as we are moving through our panel experiences. Now, to save time, the good news, I tell you the good news. The good news is we already know who our sisters are because we just had introductions. So I hope you have taken the notes. So we're going to go straight into the discussion. You'll remember in the paper, we talked about the rubric of the positiva. And that is the positive, the things that energize us, the affirmations of Pan-African women. And so we are beginning that particular rubric of our time together with agency. Where do we find Pan-African women having agency to lead and to empower? Not only for Pan-African women to receive empowerment, but to give empowerment. And so our sisters are coming today to help us to understand the issue of empowerment and agency, which all of us have. We're looking for partnerships, not just to receive, but partnerships to work together going forward. So we have Elaine, Aude, and we have Pauline, and we have Rachele, or friends Evie, who is coming today. So we will begin with Elaine, who is coming to us from Brazil. We are pleased to receive her. As we said earlier, Brazil has the second largest population of people of African descent. And so we are glad she is here to begin our conversation. So we begin with you, Elaine, please.
Thank you. Indeed, I'm honored to be here, as I said at the beginning in my introduction, because I'm learning. I'm allowed to learn from this conversation. And in that mood, that sense of learning and sharing together, I would like to share 3 steps on the reflection about agency of women of faith. First step is something that, why I'm doing this first, why I'm doing this, is because I'm working since 9 years now with the Lutheran World Federation, and we have developed a program in the Lutheran World Federation called Women's Empowerment and Gender Justice. And in this gender justice program, we developed a gender justice policy, which was adopted by the whole LWF communion in 2013. In this process of adopting the LWF and implementing now, it is translated in almost 23 languages, this document. I will bring some English copy or German. I have still in my office, not all the copies, but they are available on the website. In the process of developing, I have been reflecting as a woman coming from the south, from the southern part of the world, of the Ecuador. Who is defining what does it mean, gender and justice, or empowerment? Who is defining, who has the power of giving the definition? And more than talking only about the implementation and the concept of women's empowerment and gender justice, I would like to use some of my minutes to this important and political discussion. Who is defining those words, those concepts that we are normally adopting with a history, and it's exactly this word, is a history of concept, of memory in the trajectory. And one of of what I have been learning from the feminist perspective is it's needed first to situate, to put myself from where I speak, where my narrative emerges. And my specific narrative emerges from where my feet are standing and walking, from those spaces and relationships, experiences with my sisters and brothers in now in the Lutheran communion, with whom I'm interacting and shaping and molding my knowledge. This Lutheran World Federation is a communion of 145 member churches. And working in this global communion, I have learned that a multi-perspective of faith is needed. A multi-perspective or approach to faith is needed. My work on gender justice and women's empowerment and leadership cannot be taken in a monolithic or uniform way. What does it mean to be empowering or empowered woman and fight for gender just relationships and structures in Brazil, my own country, does not define what kind of actions should be taken in Nigeria or in Malaysia. But even more worrying for me, it's the hidden assumption that notion of empowerment, gender justice, and leadership sometimes or most of the times are defined not with a diverse experience or perspective, but based on that assumption coming from a north part or a west part of the world. From this geopolitical part, that we learn what is power, leadership, and women's leadership and empowerment. And then unveiling this assumption is coming crystallized. This assumption is very crystallized in the notion of it's universal, it is scientific, it is academic, it is objective knowledge. What is named as knowledge and how it is built, it's a political debate. I'm situating myself with someone who defines knowledges in the plural. And I always note that my computer, my Word, is giving me red, underlining. My English is very Brazilian English. Huh? Knowledges doesn't exist in English. In Portuguese and Spanish, it exists in plural. Boaventura Sousa Santos, who is a Portuguese, he's coming from Portugal. He develops this concept of knowledges in plural from the South. South is not a geographical point. It's not just a geographical space. It's a metaphor to name human suffering caused by capitalism, colonialism at global level, and a metaphor as well to resistance to overcome, minimize such suffering. It is knowledges from the South. It is an anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, and anti-colonialist metaphor. It's from that intersections, it's from these intersections that knowledges is defined more than theory, but epistemologies that are grounded in social transformation of injustice, in a broader way than general West defines knowledge. It's interacting with experience. It's conceiving relationship, feeling, thinking, time, collective organization of life, part of what forms and molds what do we define as knowledges or wisdom. It is a proposal to overcome the notion of monoculture of knowledge. And for us in the South, it's very important, these who are coming from pieces of land where monoculture is very much disseminated. Also, the monoculture of knowledge should be discussed because it's not linear, hierarchical, and it's with an assumption to be universal. It is using that ecology of knowledges that it's building an utopia of inter-knowledge, learning from each other, learning from the other knowledge, all practices and relationship among human beings and among human beings and nature. It's a democratic distribution of knowledge and access of knowledge equally. It's interacting with knowledges from the land, like Sumak Kwasai, which is the notion of sustainability, reciprocity coming from the Bolivia, which is translated in Buen Vivir. How this can be then influenced? How can this now be influencing our definition or our interaction with religion, with the religious field? Here I'm thinking of my sister, Ivone Gebara from Brazil, who defines religion not as a monolithical, uniform concept, practice. She's using the notion of biodiversity of experience in religion, and saying that experience in religion is never unique. It's not uniform, but it's based in the fragility, partiality of human existence and the relationship among human being and nature. A colonial approach is based on the appropriation not only of the territory of people, but destroying their traditional beliefs and seeking to impose their own system of truth. This is not merely a cultural destruction, says Ivone Gebara, but is a form of environmental degradation. The destruction of the earth is accompanied by the destruction of the belief systems. More than the loss of belief systems, process of colonization also eroded ritual practices, material objects associated with worship patterns and cosmological frameworks that illuminated forms of connections between a people and a given territorial location. So religion, biodiversity is multicolored differentiation and distinction between religious system and frameworks. It's a biodiversity within religion tradition. In that perspective, religious biodiversity celebrates diversity, not as a fragmentation, but as a field of possibilities, highlighting our differences as a gift and value. I want to bring, in my last 5 minutes, 2 examples. One example is a biblical example. It's a biblical story. I'm coming from the Old Testament. I like the story of Rahab. Rahab is living on the edge of the city. She's living in the, how do you call it? Exactly on the wall. Maybe there is another meaning of walls coming from this story of Rahab. She's living at the edge, at the periphery, at the margin. And it's from that periphery that Rahab is in solidarity with people, with the others that are coming to her city. She is at the margin. And from that margin, she is agent of change for her family, for her group, and for the other group coming to this city. Rahab means la ampla. In Spanish, is la ampla. It's the woman who is extended. It's the L woman, LX or XL. It's the large woman. It's the woman who is broadening her concept, her room, her house, her body, her knowledge. That image of Rahab being la ampla redefines also our notion what should be women's body, maybe, and women's house. It's helping me to understand this notion of knowledges and biodiversity of religion. This is the biblical story that I wanted to explore and continue to explore during some time now. And connecting with this, why I'm doing this? Because I have been experiencing that in a Lutheran communion, which is a global communion, having one definition of gender justice is one definition that is supposed to be universal for the global communion. It's not enough. We need to learn with this implementation and discussion of gender justice with the policy that learning how to be more Rahab, how to be enlarging our body, our understanding, our skin, to integrate, to transform our notion and concepts that are so much political. Unveiling that political concept behind our concepts, political notion that it's behind our concepts, it's very much necessary. So this is the moment of reflection that I want to bring, very short, and I want really to interact with you and engage in conversations about that idea. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we'd like to now go to Evie, who will speak at this time as well on agency.
Okay. And hold on that.
Yeah.
I give you back. Okay, all right. There. Now, we use different words for different kinds of theologians. And we've heard feminist theology rather their own, and we've heard womanist. I like to situate myself and to call myself a nanny-ish theologian, building again from the Reverend Dr. Marjorie Louise Cooper, who we know as Magic. And Nanny, as we call her, of the Maroons, was a freedom fighter in Jamaica among what we call the Africans who were kidnapped and enslaved and then ran away and fought for freedom. And one of the things about Nanny, one of the stories they tell, not in polite circles, so bear with me because I'm not a polite sort of person. Not at all. Now Nanny managed to defeat the British, yes? And the British were marching in the red coats against Nanny, and they put the guns. And what Nanny did is that she turned her back and lifted up her skirt, and she caught the bullets, and she fired them back. Now, where she caught them and how she fired them back, there are, of course, different ways of it. But I want to say, one of the things that I have learned in working with women, and sorry, gentlemen, but you know, this is how it goes. One of the things that all of us in here have, except for two, is a very precious thing that the church does not teach us to value. There's a British poem, and it starts out, poem is a nice word of saying it. Here's to the cut that never heals. I will tell you the rest afterwards. But let us celebrate that we are people of power and people of punani.
Hey!
And in working with church, you know, and dealing with the sacred spaces, one of the unspoken or the quietly spoken things, when I became a deaconess in Jamaica, and I was, you know, an Anglican, so, you know, we're very particular about that altar space. And so I'm there every Sunday. And one of the ladies gently said, you know, we were told that when you're having that thing, you know that thing? The red visitor. You are not to approach the altar. I said, sisters, I am there every Sunday. You think that my visitor don't come on a Sunday? It is blessed. Yes. And we had a lecturer from Sierra Leone, and old age take me now, I can't remember his name, it will come back for a little bit. And one of the things he said to us is that within religious circles, women being kept away is because of fear. Because who are these powerful people who bleed every month and yet nothing is wrong with them? It is our power. And that is what is sometimes used to keep us out of circles and situations. And I want us to recognize that. And we are told that it is dirty. We are told that we are insatiable, and I noted again at college, if the men got into a little trouble with young ladies or young fellows, it was hushed up and, dealt with, and somehow or other they would always graduate, and then they got transferred all over the place. And there were many sexual predators in the college where I was. I was sitting down with Anna, and I was naming out someone, and I said there were 4, and then I realized I had left out a couple of others. But if a woman was even named as perhaps having had a little encounter, you don't see her again, She is gone. And worse yet, if she gets a present from the encounter, that kind of way? Oh, yes. I recommend you to read a novel called Reverend Mother by a friend of ours called Aaron Henry. Find it on Amazon Kindle. Find it and read it. It's a very interesting story of a woman minister who is not married, as many of us are not, and wants to have a child, and she goes for artificial insemination. And the way the church deals with it, because how do they sanction her? Because she didn't get pregnant. She got pregnant outside of marriage, but she didn't have sex with a man. How you deal with that? And all of these things I put together because these are some of the issues that we don't talk about. And we all have issues to deal with. How do we actually deal with our issues of sexuality? We were told when at synod as young women, don't let the men know if you're having period pains. As young women in the church. That is against the whole, you're letting down the side of women. And I'm saying, why? What's wrong with that? If they have headache or whatever ache, and so on, they can speak, but we can't speak of our womanliness. The other thing I just want to throw out here, as we deal with this theme, is the issue of class. We deal with ethnicity. We deal with gender. But you see, class is something within all our societies. And we so judge people by it. We had a woman prime minister in Jamaica. And always, there was an encounter she had with another member of parliament from the other side. And it was filmed on television and used to put her down. And she said, "Don't draw me tongue hardly, Shaw, because this girl afraid of no man, no time." Vicky can do it even better than me. But it was said, it was used because she was speaking out as a woman of power. No, she's from low class. Oh, what kind of person can lead? And her class was used. Men from the same class can say anything, But no, as a woman, you must always be a lady. And we have to note how this works in our interaction within churches and within settings. Who can come to gatherings? Women who can behave properly and sit down nicely and, pretend in a certain way. Let us see how we empower and how we go. So as a nanny-ish theologian, get the word again, nanny-ish. From Nanny of the Maroons, nanny-ish, N-A-N-N-Y, and then the I-S-H. Yeah, copyright badge. We acknowledge that we are women of Punani and that the Punani have power, can shoot bullet on fire. Amen.
Could you repeat the author's name, Aaron, one more time? The name of it.
Aaron Henry, and it is Reverend Mother.
And my Brazilian sister, can you give me the last name of Yvonne?
Ivone Gebara. I can write down.
P-U-N-N-A-N-I. any way he wants to do
I
it.
don't have no problem with that.
The other side.
No.
Who is that banana?
Okay, I think that we will come to a time where we can get more details at the end. And of course, we are here for the next few days. So we will take time to get more details also. Thank you very much, sisters, for your presentations. And now we're going to Pauline.
Wow. There's one person in the room who can tell my stories of resilience and agency better than I can. And that is no other but my mother, Esther Mongo. Esther has journeyed with me ever since she knew me as a little girl. We met in the UK. She was going to do her PhD, and I was going to do my master's degree. Those are many, many years ago. And since then, our paths, we've walked together the long journey. As we work for the World Council of Churches, I have worked for the World Council of Churches for the last, it's the 9th year, yes. And I have been clergy in the African Church for 25 years. This year, I'll be 25 years in December 13th. Some of the issues that we come across in our work, there's a very thin line between our work and our own lives. So it's like the feminist, the womanist theology are both experiential theology as well as lived theology. Our own experiences have sharpened our tools as well as our own lives and our own encounters with the people with whom we work with. I was trying to understand that word agency, and I realized that it is our own engagement with the communities and the society. And as I say, the engagement with the community and the society and our own personal experiences is a very thin line. I would like to highlight a few issues. One of them is how I came into WCC. I came into WCC after I had lost my job teaching in a theological college in the city. I devoted my life as a chaplain to everyone, and all the students and the staff, I gave them my best as a chaplain. I also devoted my life to teaching systematic theology, which I like most, and moral theology. It never closed my brain at any one single time that I would lose that job, because I did it so well. One day, in the line of duty, something happened and my job was to go. It was a response to a rape case. A student of mine in my own fellowship group, from my own diocese, had raped her housemate. And as the chaplain, I had to accompany the housemate. Accompany her to hospital, accompany her to the police, and accompany her to safety. Little did I know I was exposing my employer, and that would cost my job. After that, I learned something that I had never learned about before, that women are actually best friends of each other, because the women who stood by me were two ladies, one who was my student and one who was a priest from my diocese. And for 1.5 years, when I was jobless, they literally fed my family, my 2 children and myself. While my husband then, is now ex, was happy serving God in the parish where he was without caring what his children ate or how they went to school. I kept thinking, why is it that women kept saying women are enemies of each other? Because throughout 1.5 years, what I saw was nothing but love from my sisters. When the job for WCC was advertised, I hit the bottom. I couldn't write my CV. I couldn't write the application letter. I had lost the language or the languages. I didn't know it. My mother, Esther, sat me down with a cup of tea and asked me to speak, and she wrote. And that's how I applied for the job and got it. Because I couldn't write, but I could speak. And somebody had a pen to write it. So for me, it was like women are really great friends of each other. If it was not for my two friends, we would have starved to death. My children would have not gone to school. If it was not for Professor Mongo, Esther, my mother, I wouldn't have got this job. So maybe I would still be struggling. Because how would I get the job if I didn't apply for it? Or if I didn't have a CV? And I think that has formed me into entering the spaces of the world, and mainly the spaces in the margins of society, where most of us don't feel called to. And those spaces of society which we refer to as the margins, that is where the children of God live. I think also that is where heaven is. And for me, that is where I find comfort, and that is where I find fulfillment in my ministry. What do I mean by those spaces of margins of society? Along the way, as I worked for WCC, I encountered women, old women, women who had lost their children to HIV. And not only did they lose their children to HIV, but they were left with orphans to look after. Most of these women were senior. One who moved my heart most has now since gone to be with the Lord. But she said on a very right note, I have lost 5 of my daughters. Come and show you where they are. They lie there. 5 of them. When the third one died, the father also died. He couldn't go. Then 2 others followed. I am here without these children. But she was smiling, and I wondered, what makes you smile? Having lost, 5 daughters and a husband. But that woman became my inspiration. My inspiration to want to enter in that village and hear more of the stories of the women, and also want to work with them to build their capacity. And since then, they have become my educators. So I have also learned that doing theology doesn't have to be in the library. You do theology with the people, because the people have the new theology. And necessarily the other one we are doing in the library may be abstract, but this one is real. These women taught us how they fought stigma, how they educated the community on a disease which not many people are willing to hear or learn about, and how they had survived through supporting one another to bring up the orphaned children. These women opened our eyes to also see, as grandmothers, they were struggling with the same things we were struggling as mothers. My children were becoming teenagers. One was a teenager, the other one was becoming a teenager. And those who are parented teenagers know the struggles that comes with. But these women say, you have taught us so much. You have taught us contextual Bible study. You have taught us about our own personal health. You have not taught us one thing. How do we bring up teenagers? When we brought up our teenagers, our own children, the world was so different to now. So when we bring up the teenagers who are our grandchildren, the world is so different. How do we do that? And they have influenced, in fact, the way even we do our work in WCC. Because they opened our eyes that we needed to create space for them to have a real encounter with the teenagers and to be able to hear each other. The teenagers to hear their grandmothers who are now their parents, and the grandmothers to hear the teenagers who are their grandchildren, but also now their children. And what that has done for me personally, it has just revolutionized the way I look at things and the way I want to do mission and the way I want to do theology, one as a woman and also as a priest and as a parent, because this encounter with the young people has opened for me a way or a door which shows that we are living in two different worlds, yet walking on the same streets. Our children are living in their own different world, and we are walking on the same streets. As we think we are in the same level, yet we are on totally different levels. Not necessarily to say that their world is bad or our world is better, but to bring us to the point of saying we cannot continue living in the same world. I mean, walking on the same streets, but living in different worlds. We need to make our streets one indeed, and also have our worlds interact, so that we are able to journey together. Our theology, to be able to influence the young girls, we need to be able to see where they are. For those of us who are lucky, we have had mothers like Esther, mothers like Nyambura, my boss, my colleague, and my friend. What is going to be there for us when we are born? How are we going to say we've influenced these people who are walking with us on the same streets, but living in different worlds? And the way we have been handling that is to invite them into our space, or to invite ourselves into their space, so that we create a safe space and hear each other. One of the greatest struggles of hearing is that sometimes you hear, but you come with a position. You come with a position to hear what you want to hear. Or you hear what you don't want to hear, and you tell your mind, I have not heard it. And I think I have seen women as having the capacity to hear and understand. And sometimes I think that is a gift that we women have, maybe necessarily that the men do not have. I am not a man, I am not really able to tell whether they have that gift. But they can tell us if they have that gift, if they are able to hear and hear properly. And for me, to conclude, is to say that before we keep on following the weed is, most of us are working with partners. So the weed where the money is, before we go where the money is, or before we go where the issues are, the global issues are, we need to create time and space to hear where the issues are on our streets. We need to hear where our girls are. I want to give you two stories as I close. Only last week, we were having one of a safe space of that kind. And the teachers who were in our meeting, one woman who was a teacher and a mother's union leader in our meeting, said to us, we face so deep problems that we are not able to share them. We have nowhere to share them. And she said, I want to share my personal experience. I teach in a school where a class two pupil in that context would be age 6 to 8, who is a girl, was asked by the teacher to take books to his house. And of course, she has all the Christian values of obedience, humility. So she takes the book to the teacher's house. And the teacher removes her dress and removes her panty. And the girl thinks very fast, this man will rape me. She must have had some knowledge about sex. Says, this man is going to rape me. He's big, I can't fight him. What do I do? So she quickly said, teacher, I think you are about to have sex with me. Please, I don't have any problem, but please get a condom. Let us use a condom. So the teacher was hit by that confrontation, and he said, okay, let me get one. So he went next door to borrow a condom from his friends. To ask for a condom from his friends. And at that point, this girl led to the office nude to tell her story. That is one of 1,000 stories we get to hear every day from children. from our girls, from our children. Yet, we want to move on and say, the issues of Africa are now with climate change, are now with this other one, this other one. I think before we move our brains, we need to still engage and see where we are as African women theologians. How can we effectively impact the streets in which we are walking but living in it? How can we influence by bringing the two worlds together to make the world more safer for us, for our girls, for our boys, and for all of us? Thank you.
Sisters, we are giving thanks to God for these powerful insights of agency. And now we are going to move to Aude, who is coming from Rwanda and United States to share.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sister, for sharing that story. I think I want to start by sharing a little bit about myself, because I don't think I can talk about my agency or the agency of the women I work with unless I've shared a little bit about my resilience. I was born in Rwanda before the genocide against the Tutsi. Was born in a mixed family, is what I like to call it. I had one parent from each of the two ethnic tribes there. And in 1994, I lost both of my parents because of the genocide. I grew up in a very religious family. Both of my parents were prayerful, religious people who loved God. My dad sang in a choir. And for the next 2, 3, 4 years after that, I actually spent a lot of time lost because I didn't understand that the God that I had grown up with, the God of love, the God of, the God who rewards goodness and punishes sin, how that God could take such wonderful parents from me. And until about 2000, I would say that I was spiritually lost because I didn't know how to reconcile what had happened to my parents, to myself, to my sisters, to my brother, with the God that I grew up hearing about. I was lucky enough, and it even is true that God is the father to orphans, because he provided for me another father and mother figure in my life who were able to bring me back into the understanding of God, of being able to not necessarily say that I embrace what has happened, but that I can be able to live and see that the experiences that I was going through have managed to make me a person, can make me a person who can be an agent for change. So I currently am living in the United States. I got there as an immigrant. I am a Black immigrant settler woman in the United States. I am of African descent. I came to the US not as part of the slave trade, or the slave trade, but actually by my own free will. I got on a plane and flew to the US. I had many other options. And I call myself a settler because the land on which that I live on is not my land. It's a stolen land from the indigenous people of the United States. So I am settling there. And I have to always acknowledge that that land does not belong to me, does not belong to my ancestors, and it will never belong to my descendants. It belongs to somebody else who no longer has a right to it. And I am a woman because of my nanny, as my and I am proud to say that I am a woman. Because of that, because of all those 4 experiences, I do believe that I am placed in a somewhat unique position to be in the United States working for advocacy. As I explained before, I the advocacy and solidarity coordinator for the World Student Christian Federation in the North American region. I think when I'm talking about racial issues, I am uniquely placed to be able to understand them. When I'm talking about immigration issues, I'm uniquely placed to understand them. When I'm talking about women's rights, I think I am uniquely placed to be able to talk about those. And also as a person who's have to deal with the aftermath of colonialization, and how drawing lines and putting names on things that should be left nameless has left me an orphan. I can also be able to say that I'm uniquely placed to be able to talk about indigenous issues. And as that's where I think it's in those 4 frameworks that I work with the people that I work with. I work with the student and young adult population of North America, so that's the US and Canada. One of the things that I've managed to learn through the years is that once you know something, you should not keep it to yourself. You should share it with others. A lot of people have been talking about storytelling, and for me, I see storytelling as a way of educating as well. So in that way, I work with the student and young adult population to try and educate them and provide leadership opportunities for them to be able to hear the stories firsthand, but also be able to stand up and advocate for others with world leaders. So at WCF in North America, we participate every year in Ecumenical Advocacy Days, which is a lobbying weekend. Those from the US probably have heard about it, where we meet and then we go to Capitol Hill and we talk to our representative about issues that are affecting the people in our country. And that's one of the things that I make sure that we can provide an opportunity for the young people in our organization to be able to come to be able to speak truth to their leaders, to be able to remember to call out those who are not fulfilling what they say they will be doing, and also to remember to thank those who are doing what they say they were going to be doing, because I think that's really important to remind our leaders that, we are thankful. We can't always go there complaining. You have to also sometimes go there to say thank you, recognize that you're doing this. We also take a group to the UNCSW, the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women. And this year, we actually managed to bring a global delegation. So we had women from all the 6 regions of the WSCF. And again, this is the same thing. We want to be able to sit and listen to the promises that our world leaders are saying, take them back home, and then be able to go and talk to them and say, you were at the UN and I was there and you said this, and now you're not doing it, or now you're doing it and we want to thank you that you're doing it. But it's a way of making sure that we are holding our leaders accountable. Another thing, when it comes to listening to stories firsthand, one of the we've started doing what we call solidarity trips, so last year we did one where we went to the US-Mexico border, and the issue was immigration, and we wanted to hear this. We wanted to make sure that these young people are hearing the stories of migrants, those who are on the US side of the border and those who have been deported and are back on the Mexico side of the border. We wanted them to be able to hear firsthand. We made sure that they went through the immigration court so they could hear the cases and see how the cases of these immigration issues are being handled. So that when they hear on TV or whatever, our leaders talk about immigrants as the way he speaks about immigrants, our current leader, they can be able to say, actually, no, I met an actual immigrant, and I spoke to an actual immigrant, and I actually got to hear this person's story. And another thing that this year we did an Indigenous solidarity trip to Canada, where we went to, we sent young people to go and talk to Indigenous tribes in Canada, and First Nations as they call them. They went to visit a First Nation in Canada to hear the stories, to be able to understand that these, one of my sister, I don't remember who was talking about, oh, it is Fatima, talking about wounds, the generational wounds, be able to hear these generational wounds of Indigenous people in Canada and what's going on there. Which for me, I think it's really important also for the young people coming from the US, because that's one issue that in the US we have completely, it's one of the many issues we have completely refused to even talk about, is the fact that, you know, the Indigenous people in the US are suffering and nobody wants to hear about them. And the picture that we paint to the world is that they actually no longer exist. I can actually speak that, you know, it's one of the things that I like to share, is that I grew up hearing about the US. I grew up hearing about all these issues that were happening in the US. And I grew up thinking that the Indian was no longer existing in the US. Because every time that the Indian was portrayed in anything, it was, you know, yeah, exactly. It was to show, like, you know, a savage who we conquered, and, you know, like, there were these people who used to cut off your scalp and all of that, and, you know, the white men came and removed the Indian person. And then I got to the US and I realized that Indigenous people still live there, Indigenous people are still part of society, yet nobody outside of the US knows that they're existing. Unlike in Canada, where even though it's unfair, like, people know they're Indigenous people in Canada. So that's one of the other thing that we do. I want to end by talking about, like, what I would like to envision as actions being. I'm talking as a young woman, a young adult in this sphere, and I'm so thankful for the invitation to have been able to come here. But in the name, the PAWEEN, one of the E in there is empowerment. And that's one of the things I would really love to see, is the empowerment, especially of young women in spheres like this. I heard a couple of things talking about, like, mentorship program, and I really am interested in knowing a little bit more about that, because I want to know how can young women, how can young people be empowered to be able to speak out in spheres like this, but also to be able to get that knowledge, so that, you know, in 20, 30 years, we'll be able to say, okay, somebody helped me get here, so let me pay it forward. And also partnerships, it's another thing that I would like to be able to get from here. It's not just networking, but also being able to build, like, concrete partnership between WSCF, which is it's really an organization for young people, with some of the other organizations that might be doing training for leadership in the church. How can we connect those kids who are just finishing their bachelor's degree and they're not 100% sure if they want to, you know, do an MD or do whatever it is that they want to do, with an organization that can offer them an opportunity to learn, to be able to want to grow in that sphere, I guess. So thank you so much.
So, sisters and brothers, I would like to invite us to give another hand of applause for all of the speakers. We are truly blessed by the insights and the stories that have been told already this morning. As moderator, I'd just like to summarize a bit of what we've heard, and then to engage everyone on these concepts that have been presented. So I will summarize in this way. We have heard about the agency of knowledges, plural. The agency of knowledges, not knowledge, but knowledges. This is what I think we have heard. We have heard about the agency of loving one another and bearing each other's burdens. The agency of loving each other and bearing each other's burdens. We've heard about the agency of mentoring. What we do to teach each other how it is we walk our various pilgrimages. We have heard the agency of place and identities, plural. The agency of place and identities, plural. I believe we've heard about the agency of womanhood and our bodies. The agency of womanhood and our bodies. I think we have heard about the agency of sacred space in the midst of struggle and woundedness. The agency of carving out sacred space in the midst of woundedness and struggle. We have heard about the agency of advocacy, standing together on behalf of each other and with each other. So here we add the agency of solidarity. Advocacy and solidarity. I believe we have heard about the agency of playing various roles. We heard about the role of being priest, being parent, being advocate. We wear different roles and we carry out different roles at different times, but we are still the same, but we are influencing our presence at different times. Then I think we have heard the agency of confidence. This is one of the true assaults, it seems to me, of women, is to undermine our confidence. But we have heard here the agency of having confidence despite the circumstances. Then the agency of listening and hearing. There is agency in being quiet, imagine, and just listening and hearing. As one who's worked with women in prison and on death row, administrative segregation and discipline, this immediately came to my mind. I think my best gift was to be able to just be quiet and listen to their stories and pray with them. All of us are given the gift of hearing and listening. And then there's the matter of the agency of grace that comes to us when we know we don't deserve it. But that agency is there for us through the Spirit, the agency of grace. And then I think we've heard about the agency of wisdom, which for me is different from knowledge. Wisdom is the practical side of how knowledge finds itself in life. We also have this great legacy of Sophia, correct? We could go there, but we won't, but we think about Sophia, an image of a woman in the idea of wisdom. So these are what I would offer as summaries of what I think we're hearing about agency from the stories and from the theological and theoretical concepts conveyed. Now, the good news is we have 30 minutes to engage conversation. And I would like to begin this time with first moments of clarification. Sometimes when we're hearing or listening, we really weren't. And sometimes we come to the knowledge of where we may have need to hear and listen again. So I want to open up the space for this time of clarifications. Maybe something said where you want more information, or maybe the concept for you in your walk would need further clarification to give maximum benefit for your pilgrimage. So can we take the time now for clarifications? No questions. No clarifications. No. Okay, fine. So, what comments would you like to offer from the journey that you're on that may align with some of the things that have been said during our panel? What sharing would you like to do?
I was kind of
Yes.
yes. I wanted to get some clarification on the biodiversity and how diversity in itself is empowered.
So I pass the mic to Elaine.
Ivone Guevara is a Brazilian theologian, a Catholic Brazilian nun, and she was working from a perspective from the northeast of Brazil, which is different from the southern part of Brazil where I come from. Northeast of Brazil, we have a diversity of culture and religious practices. It's Catholic, it's evangelical, and it's Afro-traditional religion. I think it's the translation in English of the concept of the traditional religious practices brought from Africa with the slavery. I can't say in English. Slavery. And what Yvonne is saying, that is, it is so important to recognize that religion cannot be taken as a monolithic block, as a one concept. This is Catholic tradition. This is Lutheran tradition. We are so much mixed in our practices of traditions and beliefs that a very hygienic, a very monolithic approach to religion will overlook all the other practices. And she's affirming this biodiversity. Remember that Brazilian is also a very big country where the agriculture is defined by monoculture. So biodiversity is very important for our survival. And in that sense, she is redefining the approach to understand religion as a mixed possibility and practices, as a mix of traditions. But she's also saying inside one religion, inside the Catholic tradition, you have also biodiversity of practice. It's not only the mix of different traditions that it's normal and common in our tradition in Brazil, in our religious practice in Brazil, but it's also inside. How we define what is the true Lutheran tradition? Who is defining? Where is the power to define? So especially in those days that we are commemorating 500 years of Reformation, who is defining? When the tradition, the biggest tradition of Lutheran churches are coming from Africa now. But who is giving the correct theological of the tradition normally is coming from Germany. So that discussion, it is problematized with the notion of biodiversity of religion, which I very much like.
Thank you very much, Elaine. And Yamara has a question or clarification.
I'm not seeking clarification. I just want to affirm what Evie.
Elaine.
Oh, Evie. Okay. About our womanhood, our bleeding every month. I just want to affirm that we really need to take our womanhood, our bleeding every month, the power that comes from that womb, but also the pain that comes from that womb, but also to remember, because of poverty, many of our children miss school because they don't have the sanitary pads. In my church, the Presbyterian Church, some women took this up. And they were from the upper class congregation. And they wanted to do it in the slums of Nairobi City, one of the major slums. But they were told by the young people, especially the young women in the same congregation, you can't just provide pads because those girls don't have panties. I am saying this because it was such a good thing to do, but the whole thing fell apart. Because the older adult women could would not listen to their daughters, naming the reality in the slums. So as we celebrate the power and the womanhood, we should also remember that for some of these children and mothers, this is something that puts them down because of poverty.
Thank you, sisters, for your presentation. I hear, I think the last speaker, Aude, you spoke about storytelling. I'm struggling with storytelling because it can empower, but it can also develop perpetrator. This is a word, huh?
Perpetuate?
Because if you take the storytelling in a negative way, then you bring your bitterness to the next generation. And the next generation can stand with this storytelling to do not justice, as we listen today, forgiveness, being humble, but to perpetuate the tradition. And I'm really becoming aware of the storytelling. When we are using it, we need to be clear what we want to reach. It is not to build to our young people a generation of people who have to perpetuate what we suffer. How do you say? Let me say, I suffer about something, then I put it to my daughter, and my daughter will do it again. And this is what I'm struggling with storytelling. I don't know if you see my point. I could say it in French, it could be better. Oh yes. L'issue avec les storytelling, c'est d'éveiller la conscience pour que les choses qui ont été faites dans la tradition ne se répètent pas. Mais maintenant, ce n'est pas le cas toujours. Dans les storytelling, nous sommes en train de projeter pour le futur un groupe d'individus qui doivent prendre conscience de la tradition, de notre souffrance dans la tradition, et pour continuer à perpétuer ou à se venger. Alors là, storytelling, ça devient un problème. Donc il y a deux parties dans ce storytelling.
Thank you. I definitely understand where you're coming from. Okay, so she was trying to explain that storytelling has two faces, two sides to it. It's most of the time it's meant to be able to express what has happened, so that people know our pain and our suffering. But sometimes, instead of it being an agent for change, it can be used as a way to sow hatred and vengeance into the next generation. So that what has hurt me, I am putting into my son or my daughter, so that that person can then use it as a way of trying to get a price from those who hurt me or their descendants. And I definitely do understand that can be a problem. And I also think that one of the things that we offer, at least in WCF, is that we acknowledge that there are two spheres for storytelling. One of the spheres is for those who have gone through pain to be able to purge themselves of the pain that they're going through. So by being able to say what has happened. And I think that's a time for mindful listening. And just like only those are the ones who are providing these stories. Those are the only ones whose voices are being heard. At the same time, there's also another another sphere for storytelling is where it's like for learning, to be able to, for those who have no idea what the other side is going through, to be able to sit down and hear that. So it's not necessarily just about like me telling my story to the same people as me. I don't know if that makes sense. So I'm not telling my story to people who are coming from me, but actually from people from the other side, by saying this is what has happened because of you know, my generation went through this because of that, the generation from your side did this. And offering them the opportunity to be able to ask questions in a safe space, and also to be able to understand how it doesn't end at just telling the story, it also continues as, you know, where do we go from here? Like, I like the fact that we use solidarity, advocacy and solidarity together, because we don't want it to be we are just standing next to you, but also like we are going to advocate to make sure that, you know, we provide you an opportunity to be able to say what you want to say, to be able to advocate for yourself, but also to know that you have people with you. So it's not just, you know, people of minority going to the Hill to advocate for minority issues, but it's a diverse group of people coming from the minority and majority groups in the United States, coming to the Hill together to be able to do advocacy. So the storytelling then becomes a way of let's share this message so you know this is happening, so people won't lie to you because you've heard it directly from the people who have been affected. But then we take it a step further of encouraging people to be able to go and try and do something about it. And it really, it's a circle that we have to be aware of when you are telling stories, that we're not bringing people down with those stories, but we're trying to encourage them to be able to have a step where they can actually have their voices heard instead of feeling like the pressure of the stories is bringing them down. And I also have to acknowledge that it's not just in WSCF North America, WSCF is a world organization, it's a global organization, and these things are coming up everywhere, where like the people in the US are advocating for foreign policy change because of the stories we're hearing from people from the Philippines, for instance. And that's good to be able to hear the story of the people from the Philippines when you're in the US and you know that there's a trade agreement that is being debated on that might affect the people from the Philippines. So those stories are actually being used to be able to affect change and also inform our advocacy work.
Thank you. I just want to appreciate the issue that was raised, that storytelling in itself does not necessarily bring healing or enlightenment or empowerment, but it's the methodology that is used. And in our South African context, what we have found with the Institute for the Healing of Memories work and with the young people, that if the stories and the space and the methodology is not done correctly, you can make, say for instance, lots of the young white people feel guilt and shame because of what their people did to others. So you need to do it in a way in which they can make sense that it is not just about people, it's about also structures and systems in society that operates, which Elaine was talking about in terms of. And that is very much part of our methodology, because we have found that when bad things has happened to you, people want to know, why did it happen to me? And part of that why is exploring the systems and the economic systems, the cultural systems, the religious systems that makes it possible for these things to happen, that sometimes condones it and supports it, and why it is then important to become active in changing those systems to become empowered, so that the storytelling and the healing journey is not for healing's sake, but in itself, but also for change, also to bring about change. And our methodology, which I won't go into, is structured in such a way that we hope it moves people into that direction. But we're very sensitive about how we work with memory is contested. We can either enforce certain structures and the way things are, or we can work towards changing those things. So the way in which we memorialize and work with memory is very important for people. But I wanted to just, in terms of Elaine, in South Africa, the big thing now, and maybe Mary Ann could, from the University of Stellenbosch, would have more to say about it, is the issue of decolonization. How do we decolonize our education, our religion, in all spheres of life? How do we decolonize the way in which we approach and the way we work in relation to what has happened during decolonization? The battering of our self-esteem, the development of self-hate of who we are as Africans, and what does that mean for religion and how religion is practiced? One of the things of our organization, we also have a youth program which is called Restoring Humanity. And one of the youth projects is called God Has Many Names. And the one thing that has emerged very strongly in that project in particular is the demonization of African women spiritualists, which is called witches. And it has been it is on the increase, as you say. As apartheid has been, as we're trying to lay apartheid to rest, we're not there yet. African spirituality has seen a great increase in terms of practicing. But of course, there's also a marriage with African spirituality, with Christianity, as well as with Islam. So culture infuses the way things are done. But in the process, women again have become targets of grave violent brutality in the process, of again being burned, being hounded, being blamed for HIV and AIDS. And I think it is something that we need to discuss as women and women that work with faith in terms of how do we support those women in those things. But it is about, I think, the knowledges of religion and how religion plays itself out. I found it very useful as a framework to do. But I'm more interested to hear from other people about it.
Over here.
I wanted to say 2 points about the agency of identity and about mentoring from my personal experience in the Orthodox Church in Egypt. Egypt, originally before the Islamic ruling, it was mostly Christians, and the original language was the Coptic language. And by time, we started shifting to the Arabic language, which is the official language now. So, but if you visit any church, you will find the Coptic language in all the scriptures and in all the books. So, you will find every church very keen on teaching little kids how to read Coptic, how to sing in Coptic, as not to lose our identity. The other thing is the mentoring. The Orthodox Church believes in having someone to confess to. I believe the Catholics too. So every Christian has someone to confess the sins to. And the priest usually helps you, give you some advice on how to do better next time. But now we have the new philosophy of having a mentor. Usually kids and teenagers are advised to have a mentor, someone who's a bit older than you and knows how to do better with life. So usually the teenager has someone to mentor him, someone to speak to on a daily basis who can help you deal with your everyday struggles and so on. So I believe these 2 points are very in action in the Orthodox Church, the identity and the mentoring. Thank you. storytelling. I hear and understand what's being said and the concern of the process of, from what I hear, is transformation and reparations. And I hear it from a different lens, a different ear, a different narrative. That's not, I don't think my narrative is not as quite as polite.
Go for it, girl.
I am. I'm just trying to get my words together. The way I see storytelling, it is from the voice of and the narrative of that individual telling the story. So however that story is told, I think they have that right, that agency to speak it in the way it is they're impacted and affected by their trauma, their isms, that caused such the story to be told. And as what Elaine was saying, who is the judge of what that gender justice is? Who is the judge of anything, of anyone's story? So to put a limit, to curtail, to make guidelines, if you will, to how a person's story is told, I think it's a little, not little, it is oppressive. I think that it's contributing to furthering intra, if you will, oppression amongst the storyteller. Should the white counterpart feel guilt? Absolutely. Is it my job to tell my story to make them feel guilty? No, it's my job to tell the story the way the story should be told from my narrative. So therefore, if they feel guilty by the byproduct of my story, good. It's not for me to marginalize me any further. It's not my job to be passive or to be more concerned about how guilty am I going to make them feel. Yes, the systems definitely should be explained. I'm not negating that because that too is part of the story. However, if their ancestors and they're feeling shame for their ancestors' duty, then I can't help you for that because my ancestors went before me and have been trailing blazing the trails and have gone, died, sacrificed, martyred, etc. So how do I continue to be repaired if in fact I don't tell the story authentically and thoroughly? And yeah, in that process, my healing does begin, and in that healing comes my transformation. I can't see healing without transformation. I think it's one of the same. You heal, and then there's that transformation of becoming delivered. And then the forgiveness and the the reconciliation then begins. And so there's a process that the guilt has to come from the oppressor as I tell my story, how dirty, hateful, evil, joyful it comes. And then the oppressed and the marginalized can dance, if you will, with the oppressor in the sense of, in a euphoric type of way, if you will, from the transformation that occurs through reconciliation. So I think the process that's being told are suggesting, and it could be, I get misunderstood, but I was listening intently that it started to get me a little concerned of how we're talking about advocacy and justice, but yet we are concerned about the oppressor, not being Christ-like, but are a Christian. But hell, Jesus flips tables when they weren't doing right. He got angry, so I think we have a right to own the emotions that we're given, and to tell it authentically.
Thank you. I had an opportunity to be part of the Pan-Methodist Commission on Cooperation, and we went through that. It was the Black Methodist denominations and the white Methodist denominations. We told our story, and we danced around the issue. Finally, two members escorted to the head. And they now have a ceremony that they do that acknowledges the pain and the issues that occurred, and they have agreed to move forward on a different level. But until you can tell the story and then have that story recognized for what it is and what it has done, you cannot move forward.
No. Sisters, we want to thank you for the clarifications and the interventions. I'm your timekeeper. This is what a moderator does. It is 12:43. I will, because she's a panelist, I will give her a quick moment to wrap up a quick comment, and then I will wrap us up. But please, we're here until Thursday, so we have time. 1 moment.
Thank you so much. So thank you for bringing that up. And I think one of the things that I want to point out is that, like I had said, there are two spheres in which we do storytelling. And one of them is the sphere for the people who have the story to say them, and for others to listen. Like you can't comment on my suffering because you're in my shoes. So those moments are there because they're needed. These stories need to come out. And I actually wanted to share a couple of things. One of them is the fact that now I consider myself a settler because I was part of an exercise called the blanket exercise. If some of you have been part of this, you probably know how powerful it is. If you haven't been part of it, I recommend you being part of it. And it's basically a way of showing America, the US colonization using blankets. And every time when historically land was stolen, a blanket is taken away. And then you end up seeing how much of the land that we call the United States, how it was stolen, and what's the little bit that's left where you find these, like 3 people can no longer even stand on it because it's so small. And when I was part of this exercise, I actually found myself, I was sitting and I lifted my feet up because I felt like I was no longer worthy of standing on on US land when it was not my land. So that guilt, it can actually make you an agent for change. I feel like the reason why I'm so passionate about Indigenous rights is because of that guilt that I went through. So the guilt can be good. Another thing is, I was part of the Truth and of witnessing the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in Canada, and listening to Indigenous people call out churches, because they're saying, these rapes, this culture genocide was happening because of churches. And as a Christian, you're supposed to be able to feel that guilt.
Yeah. So please know, on this afternoon, after the second panel, you see on the agenda, we will divide up into groups, working groups, where we will go more deeply into this subject of agency and resilience. Okay? So these have been